class. Yes. In the previous class, what we have discussed? You are there in the previous class or new to this class?
Yes, ma'am.
Durga was there.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have discussed about the types, barriers of communication, introduction, and I think we have also discussed about the characteristics of mass communication.
Yes,
Have we
ma'am.
discussed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And elements of communication also we have finished, and then we started the models of communication. No?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I think we have discussed one model of communication and the rest are pending, I believe. You have some 4 models in your syllabus as part of, I think, unit 3 this is. Okay, we'll begin that. The next models of communication. I am sharing the screen because you will be able to see the image. Is it fine? Is it okay? You are able to see this now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sure. We'll discuss. So, is there anyone who can remember the previous? What is the model? Or you forgot? It's already 1 week. Yes. So communication models are nothing but the models are proposed to explain the process of communication and the independence of each element in the communication process. All those models were based on assumptions or based on the imaginations of the scholars who proposed those models of communication. So from the 48 onwards, from the Aristotle to till 1956, etc. There were different communication scholars. They proposed different communication models to explain the process of communication. So they wanted to explain how when information is passed from a person to the other person or from a place to place, what happens, how information flows. To explain those things, they propose different models. So a good communication model will try to explain the process of communication, which is very closer to the reality. But different communication models will have they have explained different elements in the communication process. Okay. So what we have here is you have a Loswell model, SMCR model, Osgood and Schramm model, and you have Shannon and Weaver model of communication. We have already discussed the Loswell model, which was proposed by David Bedlow which was proposed by Harold D. Loswell in the year 1948. It simply says, starts like who says what in which channel, to whom, with what effect. So if you are able to answer this serial question, you will come to know about the elements of communication. So who says is a source, or the communicator says what is a message, generally what the source is wishing to communicate, and in which channel is refers to the medium of communication or the channel of communication that is carrying the message from the source to the receiver. Then we have to whom, that is that refers to the receiver, and with what effect is something the observable or measurable change which happens within the receiver after he receives a message from the source. So it is a linear model of communication that was proposed in the year 1948, and it can be applicable to mass communication. And the model was criticized because of they have not mentioned about the barriers of communication, and along with that they have not discussed about the feedback process. Generally, in any kind of communication, we need to have the feedback. So it can be only applicable to mass communication where we don't get a feedback, or if we get also, we get a delayed feedback. Okay, that we have discussed in the previous class. Now we have, we'll move on to the Osgood and Schramm model of communication. So here, this model was proposed in the year 1954 by Charles E. Osgood and Wilbur Schramm. According to them, communication is a dynamic process which is happening between the individuals. So this, according to them, communication is nothing but the sharing of information, ideas, and attitudes. They explains that because the human communication is happening between the individuals, they explains communication as a dynamic process where both the individuals, the source and the receiver, are equally exchanging the information between them, and both of them are involved in encoding and decoding of messages. Okay, we have, I think in the previous classes, we have discussed about what is encoding and decoding. But as part of this model, again, I will explain you. So here, if you see, there are two circles and in between, there is a message. The arrow shows that communication exchange is happening between the two individuals. So this Osgood and Schramm model is clearly explains the process of human communication between the members. It can be between the two individuals, or it can also be applicable to the mass communication because there is a feedback. But here, the encoder, interpreter, and decoder, if you see in the first, all those are same. We can consider the encoder, interpreter, and decoder are as the source or the communicator, and the message is what the encoder is encoding. While encoding a message, the source is called as the encoder. Then here, there is a person called decoder or the receiver. Decoder, interpreter, and encoder will be the next person who is receiving the communication from the source. Okay, so here encoder is nothing but an individual, as we have discussed, like the source. Encoder must be an individual. He may be a painter, he may be a producer of a film, or he may be an individual, or he may be a teacher or a group of organization, etc., whatever it may be. So encoder is having some messages or some information. Out of the information, whatever is having in his brain, he might be deciding to communicate a message or some information towards the receiver. So encoder is nothing but the source or the individual who is wishing to communicate a message with the receiver, or the decoder. So here, decoder is the individual who is receiving a message from the source or the encoder. So message is nothing but what the source is encoding for the benefit of the receiver. So here, the receiver or the decoder, while interpreting the messages, he is perceiving the messages or the meaning in the message which is communicated by the source or the encoder. So while interpreting the information or a message, the decoder is again acting as the interpreter. The decoder and interpreter is the same. Along with that, the encoder is also same. So here it explains the process how the information is being perceived by an individual. So decoder, after receiving a message, he interprets, or the decoding process happens. So decoding is nothing but the perceiving of a message. So here the decoder is looking for the meaning in the message which is communicated by the encoder. So after perceiving or after understanding a message, after perceiving or after understanding the message, etc., again the decoder is acting as the encoder. Again, he will be sending his feedback in the form of a message. So here the decoder is again acting as a encoder, and he is encoding a message. So encoding is nothing but it is a process of formulation of a message within the mind of a source. So here encoder is becoming as the source, and again he is sending back his feedback in the form of a message towards the source who first initiated the process of communication. So here the source again, while encoder, while receiving the communication or a messages from the other person, the decoder, he is acting as a decoder. Here again the process of decoding happens within the encoder or the source. He again acts as the interpreter. He perceives the message and he looks for the meaning in the message which is communicated by the receiver or the decoder, and the process continues. So here there are two individuals who are mutually exchanging the information, and the communication is flowing between the two individuals in a circular way, and it is clear example for the human communication which happens between the two individuals. So here the arrow shows that the messages are passed down from the source to the receiver, but as if we are this explains the human communication, we have to assume that the air is something which is carrying the messages from the source to the receiver, and here our mouth acts as the transmitter that changes the messages into the sound waves, and these sound waves are carried through the air that is becoming as a channel of communication, and the other person here is acting as the decoder or the receiver, and the process of interpreting the message which happens in the human brain. If it is a telephone conversation, for example, between the two individuals, your telephone set will act as the transmitter that changes the sounds or what we are communicating, that changes the sound waves into the electrical signals, and these electrical signals will be carried through the wires, the telephone cables, and the other person where the receiver will act as the receiver, and finally it reaches the destination point called the receiver, and here the receiver will perceive the message. So here the process happens if it is a telephone conversation. Okay, so here the Osgood and Schramm model of communication. So Osgood and Schramm model perceives that communication always happens in a circular manner, and there is a feedback which is exchanged by the receiver towards the source, and the source again, after receiving a communication from the decoder or the feedback he gets from the decoder, again he acts as the encoder, and the process continues. Because of that, according to the Osgood and Schramm, communication is a dynamic process, and it is a circular process, circular in nature, and both the individuals are acting as the encoders and decoders. Is this clear? So encoder and the source is same, decoder, receiver, interpreter is same, and encoder, while receiving the feedback from the receiver, again he acts as the decoder, and he interprets while interpreting the messages, he acts as the interpreter. Then the process continues. Again he will send his information or the message towards the receiver. Yes. Again, we have a model called Shannon and Weaver model of communication that was proposed. Osgood and Schramm model is clear now? Do you have any doubts?
No, ma'am.
If it is clear, we'll discuss the other models. So we have in your syllabus, we again have this Shannon and Weaver model of communication that was proposed proposed in the year 1949. And here, Shannon was an American mathematician and electronic engineer, and Weaver was an American scientist. Both of them proposed this communication model that is termed as the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. And it was also termed as the mathematical theory of communication. It is also called as the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. So based on this model, many communication studies have been conducted to see the impact of the communication. So this is also a widely accepted model of communication. According to this, so here Shannon and Weaver, they joined together to write an article for a Bell Systems technical journal. They wanted to find out how to send maximum information through a given channel. So both they were working for as one person is an electronic engineer and the other person is an American scientist. Both of them wanted to find out how the telephone cables and the radio waves can be used to transmit the information from a source to the receiver, and they wanted to test how to send the maximum information, and they also wanted to find out to measure the capacity of a channel. So by working to work on that, again, based on their work, they proposed this model called as Shannon-Weaver model of communication. According to this Shannon and Weaver model of communication, communication is a system which is composed of 5 elements and something called noise. So here it is also a linear process centered model because it also shows that communication is happening only in one direction as the communication is flowing in only one way. Because of that, it is also called as a linear centered model of communication. And Lasswell model is a linear model completely. Then we have discussed whatever we have discussed that Voskutt and Schramm model, that is the circular model of communication. And Shannon and Weaver model is a linear centered model of communication. Okay. So according to this model, communication has 5 elements and 1 noise. They here, if you see the information source. So information source is element generally that is a information source is a communicator, somebody, as we have discussed, an individual or a group or maybe an organization, etc. So they have a message, and this message is changed into a signal by the transmitter. So here, out of the many messages, the source will have to communicate a message, something. Here, the 5 elements what we have is information source, a transmitter, channel, receiver, destination, and noise. So here, information source is communicating a message, and that message is something which is changed by the transmitter into the signals. These signals are carried through the channel, and at the end, the receiver is going to receive the received signals. Then it reaches the destination. Generally, the destination is nothing but where the information is going to arrive. So generally, it arrives the human brain where the information is processed. Okay. So here, information is source is sending a message out of the many messages he might be having in his brain, and the messages whatever he is wishing to communicate with the receiver, those messages are encoded, and here the transmitter is something which is changing the messages, converting the messages into the electrical signals. So here it can be applicable to the, as they were working for the they were writing for the Bell Systems technical journal, they wanted to test measure the capacity of the channel. They have used the telephone wires and the radio waves as the channels of communication. They wanted to test how the communication happens, and based on that only they proposed this model. So here the transmitter is, if you assume the transmitter as the telephone set, the voice will be the headset of a person is communicating, encoding the messages. When a message is encoded by the information source as the individual or the source, the messages will be converted by the transmitter into the electrical signals. So for example, if you see the radio transmission process, how it happens. Are you aware of the radio transmission process? I think you might not. So there is something called microphone. Generally, the microphone will pick up the sound that will be received by a amplifier. The amplifier will convert the sound frequencies, the audio frequencies, into electrical signals. So these electrical signals will be carried through the wires towards the other end. So like that, the same way here, when if it is a telephone conversation, the telephone set, the headset will convert the signals, the sound waves, into the electrical signals. The electrical signals are carried through the telephone wires, and at the other person, the receiver will receive the communication, and your brain, your ears will act as the receivers, and the information arrives at your brain. So in that way, they propose these elements to explain the process of communication. And they have also mentioned the concept called a noise for the first time. If you see the other models, they have not mentioned about any communication barriers. But in reality, when communication is taking place between the individuals, communication when communication is happening, there are different variables that might interrupt the communication process. What we have discussed in the previous classes, the barriers of communication. So here there are many barriers that may interrupt the communication process, but according to Shannon and Weaver model, the noise is something that is interfering with the channel. So here, when we are employing a channel of communication to transmit your messages from the source to the receiver, here the noise is interrupting the communication process, and it is interrupting the channel. So because of the noise which is present in the channel, either the source will not be able to communicate properly, and the other end, because of the channel is acting as a mechanical barrier, the receiver will not be able to perceive the information in a right way, keeping in view the information source. So the channel distorts the communication, and here the receiver will not be able to perceive the information properly, which is communicated by the source. Okay, so that is Shannon and Weaver model. According to them, communication is a system that is composed of 5 elements. So which means they proposed 5 elements and noise as to explain the process of communication. The 5 elements what they have proposed are the information source, transmitter, channel, receiver, and destination. Information source is an individual who is communicating a message. The messages are converted into the signals by the transmitter. The signals will be carried through the channel. At the other end, the receiver will receive the signals, and it reaches the destination point where the communication arrives, and communication is going to be processed. And the noise is something which disrupts the channel. Because of that, the source will not be able to communicate properly with the receiver, and the receiver will not be able to perceive the communication properly, which is communicated by the source. This is an example for the mechanical noise, as the channel is itself becoming as a barrier of communication. Then we have, okay, that is Shannon and Weaver model of communication. Again, you have Berlow's SMCR model as part of your syllabus. So SMCR model, okay, Shannon and Weaver model is clear, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, madam. Okay, done. We have much more syllabus to discuss. SMCR model of communication that was proposed by David Berlow in the year 1960. According to them, they proposed 4 elements in the communication process. Along with that, under each element, they proposed sub-elements. Under each element, they proposed 5 sub-elements. So according to them, communication is a something, it involves basic components like a source, message, channel, and the receiver. And this model explains that both the source and the receiver will have the same kind of communication skills, etc. But in reality, that is not possible. So there is, they have not mentioned the channels as a specific channels which carries the information from the source to the receiver. So if you see this image, you will understand. So here the source, according to Berlow, we have 4 elements in the communication process, and the source is encoding a message. Here the receiver is decoding a message which is being transmitted through the channel. So here in source, they have proposed again the 5 sub-elements. So the communication skills, attitude, knowledge, social system, and the culture. So here the source, if you see, the knowledge, communication skills, it includes the ability of the source to read, write, listen, and to communicate or express themselves very quickly, or how quickly he organizes his communication. He tries to explain the messages with the other receivers. So here communication depends on the communication skills of a source. Then the source, again we have the attitude as a sub-element. Attitude of the source towards self, towards the subject on which he is communicating, or towards the receiver. So the source should have the right kind of attitude to communicate effectively with the receiver. Source should not think he is superior or he is inferior when he is comparing with the receiver. So he has to have the right kind of attitude. For example, if it is a classroom learning, the teacher's attitude must be to make the children understand the concept, and the receivers or the children's attitude must be to understand what the teacher says. Okay, if that kind of attitude they have, there will be a healthy environment between the individuals, and the communication also takes place in a effective manner. And here the knowledge as a sub-element, knowledge levels of the source on the subject or the topic which he is speaking. Okay, so here the knowledge also levels of the communication, the speaker or the source also will affect the communication process. And social system, it includes the values, the customs, the religions, beliefs, general understanding of the society. Everything is part of the social system, and culture is also a part of the social system, but they have proposed as a sub-element under the source. So here, if communication has to be effective, the source has to have good communication skills. He should have the right kind of attitude towards the receiver. He should be You should have knowledge about the subject on which he is speaking, and the social system is the physical environment which has to facilitate the communication has to happen and where the communication is taking place. It includes the culture, the norms of the society, the traditions, the beliefs, the values, culture, religion, everything, which is there as part of the social system. And here the source is encoding a message. Encoding, as already we have learned, it is a process where a message is formulated within the source, within the mind of a source. So here the source is encoding a message. So what is a message? So message includes the content from the beginning to the end, what the source is wishing to communicate with the receiver. Just I will show you. If you are able to, you can check again. So here the content is from the beginning to the end, what the source is wishing to communicate. The elements of the message as a sub-element under the message, the language, gestures, body language, etc. What we use to communicate with the receiver. For example, if it is a one-on-one communication, we use both the language as to express ourselves, along with that the body language or the facial expressions, body movement, eye contact, all those non-verbal cues and signs which we use to communicate with the receiver. And the treatment is how a message is packaged from the beginning to the end, or the way a message is conveyed by the source for the receiver. And the structure is how all the elements are arranged, the way the message is going to be delivered for the receiver. So for example, if it is a classroom lecture, when we are discussing about, before we discuss about what is the concept of communication, etc., we can't discuss the theories of communication or the barriers of communication, etc. So in that way, if we are delivering a lecture also, it should have a beginning, middle, and end. The same way, the messages also should be structured in a proper way so that the receiver will perceive or understand the message in a effective manner. So the code is something in which the message is sent. So here, if we are using the communication, if it is a oral communication, etc., your body language, your oral communication, not oral, it is verbal communication. Again, if it is a oral communication, it includes the written communication and spoken communication also. So here we use verbal communication along with the non-verbal communication, the signs, etc., to communicate with the receiver. So here the code is the transmission format of a message. Whether we are using the electronic media kind of things to transmit the messages, so how a message is going to be delivered for the receiver, that is something we call it as a message. Then if you see the channel, so they have not mentioned the channel as a specific thing which carries the message from the source to the receiver. But here they propose all those 5 senses of the human being will act as the receivers of a communication. They will, which means we can assume that hearing means we can assume that the radio is something we are able to, they are proposed as a medium that is carrying the messages from the source to the receiver. And seeing means, again, like a television, that can be used as a channel of communication. Touch, smell, and taste, these are something where physically can be present in the environment, and that can be used as the transmitters of the communication or the channels of communication. For example, touch. In a non-verbal communication, or when we are communicating with the help of a language, that is a verbal communication, we also may use the non-verbal cues. We can touch a person, we can hug a person, we can give a shake hand, etc. That is also a part of the communication. If you are giving a shake hand or if you smile at the other person, that is also part of your communication. The same way, if the other person is responding to your smile, if he smiles at you again, then that is also a part of communication. That is also a communication. And smells, burning smell, or when a delicious food is cooked at somebody's else, or in our house only, that also your nose will act as the receiver, and that tells you that something is cooked very, it is going to be very delicious, and you may tempt to eat that food which is prepared. And tasting, your tongue will act as the receiver of your communication, and when something is prepared, you can taste it. So here, so they have not mentioned the specific channels which carries the messages which are encoded by the source towards the receiver, but they have proposed all the senses of the human being can act as the receivers and senders of communication. And we can assume like seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting, etc. All these are the human senses will be acting as the receivers of communication. So when we see a television, or when we listen to a radio, when we use both seeing and hearing, which means when we use the ears and the eyes to receive a communication, that is the television, and the eyes to read a newspaper or a magazine, etc., and touch if it is a non-verbal communication. So they have, even though they have not proposed the different elements like the channels under that, but we have to assume that the communication is flowing from the source to the receiver. And according to Berlow, the receiver communication skills, attitude, knowledge, social system, and culture also same when we compare with the source. Here again, it depends on the individual who is receiving the communication. Depending on his communication skills, only he may be able to perceive the messages which are encoded by the source. And here the attitude of the receiver also should have the right kind of attitude to receive the messages from the source. And the knowledge levels, both the source and the receiver's knowledge levels must be equal to perceive the message. And social system where the communication is happening, both the source and the receiver should have the same kind of social system, etc. But in reality, no individuals will have the same kind of communication skills, attitude, knowledge levels, and social system. So because of that, the Berlow SMCR model was criticized. And apart from that, the Berlow SMCR model is not speaking about the feedback or the barriers of communication which may affect the communication process. And the feedback, any communication, if it has to be effective, there should be a healthy environment where the mutual exchange of information happens. But it is applicable to the mass communication, as the receivers at the other end are able to receive the communication using all their senses as the receivers of communication. So even though the model is criticized, based on this model, communication studies also have been conducted to see how the individuals will perceive the message from the source, how they are able to receive the communication, and what kind of impact it has on the audiences. It is as it is also applicable to the mass communication. Various communication channels are used to communicate the messages with the receiver, and the receivers are able to perceive the communication from the source. So these are the models you have in I think unit 3 of your material, what we have. Okay, I'm stop sharing this models of communication. How many of you are there? 8. Okay. So next, what we have is the theories of communication. We'll discuss the theories in the next class because we have another 20 minutes. We'll move on to, as we already know what is communication and different types of communication, we'll move on to the Unit 6, that is their mass media and society. We have already discussed what is mass communication. Okay, are you aware of that or you forgot? Nobody is responding. So in a communication, just we have to respond to the messages. Otherwise, the source will perceive that you are not able to perceive the information, are not able to understand what the source speaks. Okay, if you are going to be in journalism profession, you must react or respond to the questions. Yes, as we are speaking that feedback is most important thing that the source has to get. Chalo. So I think you are familiar with the concepts we have discussed today, the Shannon and Weaver model, Osgood and Schramm model of communication, Shannon and Weaver, the other. Somebody is sharing some chat, I don't know. Okay. So then you have under 6, unit 6, you have mass communication. So here mass communication, we have already discussed that mass communication is nothing but communication that is or the messages which are delivered for the large number of audiences. So mass includes, it refers to the large or infinity number of people. Okay, so communication, when it is delivered for the benefit of large number of audiences, etc., we call it as a mass communication. So here in mass communication, we use different platforms or different tools to reach out for the receivers. So what are the tools we use? So like we may use the newspapers, magazines, books. Apart from that, we can use electronic media like television and radio, or we can also use the internet or the new media technologies to reach the large number of audiences. But there is a slight difference between mass communication and interactive communication, or the communication which is enabled by the ICT technology, that we call it as interactive communication. So in mass communication, the messages are simultaneously dispersed for the large number of audiences. And in a interactive communication, on the convenience of a source, they may communicate with the large number of audiences with the help of different ICT tools which are enabled by the online, or which is facilitated by the internet. So here there is something called asynchronicity. On the convenience of the source, they may send the messages to the large number of audiences, and the other end, the receivers also can receive the communication depending on their time or depending on their convenience. That is the only difference between the mass communication and the interactive communication. And here in mass communication, depending on, as we have already discussed, the audiences, the mass media audiences, the audiences are anonymous to each other, they are anonymous to the media also, and here they are also heterogeneous audiences, as they are living throughout the geographical area. And depending on the reach, to which extent the mass medium, the channels are available, based on that, we can call them as the mass media audiences, or the readers, listeners, and the viewers of a broadcast media. So here, the medium, something what we call it as a mass medium, that is that includes the newspapers, television, radio, internet, and other publications which are available for the large number of audiences to disseminate different kinds of information. That may be the news, or it can be depending on the news articles, or it can be carried specialized magazines or books, whatever is which are printed for the benefit of different kinds of readers. And it can be the mass communication may be dispersed using the television as the channel of communication, where the viewers can get insight into the various issues which are discussed in the television. And here the mass communication is something which is conveys a lot of information for the benefit of the viewers, listeners, and the readers. And at present, the widely consumed mass media are the television and also the internet. And the least consumed medium has become like, what is the least consumed medium? With the advent of advent of this technology, the smartphone which came into existence, and nowadays we are not bothered about the physical newspapers also, but we read the newspaper copies, the pages or newspapers or journals, etc., with the help of the smartphone, with the help, which is facilitated by the internet, etc. So here the television, as it is a audiovisual medium, it has a capacity to attract the viewers, so than the any other medium has. So if you see the listeners of a radio station, as when we are working in our home or when we are traveling, we are able to listen to the content, but we might not be able to have the recollection capacity when we listen to a station. But as the visuals, like our eyes can register more than 1,000 visuals at a time, etc., the audiovisual medium like television is more attractive, and it can we as a media audiences, we may also pay attention to the television more than any other medium. And here the mass media also has a role into the society. It serves various needs of the individuals. And if in your syllabus, we have already discussed the various functions of communication, where we also have discussed about the mass communication functions as part of that. But again, in your syllabus, you have the role and functions of media, and on that we have mass media can help in change. So as the society, if you see from the beginning to at present, from 1780 onwards, when the Bengal Gazette came into existence, which was launched by the Hickey, James Augustus Hickey, and the television was started broadcasting in India, the Doordarshan, that is from September 15th, 1959 onwards, and the radio from 1923 onwards, the Radio Club of Bombay, Radio Club of Calcutta, Radio Club of Madras, etc. They used to transmit programs for the listeners to a limited geographical area, but later on, the British government took over the broadcasting, and later it was renamed as All India Radio in the year 1936 onwards. So here, from the beginning till now, the newspapers or the radio stations or the television, etc., they are propagating the messages which to change the perceptions of the individuals in a society. If you see the sati, the practice of sati, even it was abolished earlier, before the abolition of sati, like the Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Kandukuri Veereshilingam Pantulu with their newspapers, and the Hindu also, all those were started with the purpose of social education, and they provided the information with help of the newspapers to change the perceptions of people regarding these social evils. So here, most of the newspapers and the broadcast media channels were launched to propagate the messages of social education, promote the literacy in the country, promote the eradication of the HIV/AIDS, promote the family planning or the social education, etc. To bring social changes within the social system, etc. The media institutions came into existence. That is a different thing. Now it has become like a business, and different stakeholders are owning different media institutions. That is a different thing. But the media institutions are somewhere or the other promoting the social change, and it is further developing the nation by providing various kinds of information for the benefit of the viewers, listeners, and the readers. And as media is considered as a social agent of social change. So the more and more individuals expose themselves to the different kinds of media, the media may change the perceptions of people regarding the various issues. And because of that, we call the media as a agent of social change. Then we have something that mass media made the world smaller and closer. Yes, with the advent of the satellite communication that facilitated the media platforms to reach the large number of audiences at a time, and that made the global whole members of on the planet into a global village. And when something like a cricket match which is transmitted by a television channel, etc., that can be consumed by the audiences who are scattered or dispersed throughout the geographical area. So that is facilitated by the satellite communication. And mass media also promotes distribution of goods and services. So as you already know, the advertisements which are being placed in between the film which are transmitted, or the advertisements which are being placed in the print media like newspapers and magazines, etc., all that will persuade the audiences to buy a product or a service which is launched by a company. It can be a banking or insurance or hospital, or it can also be a government. So government also persuades the audience with the help of the public service messages to change their behavior, or to accept a change, or to promote social good, etc., to develop the nation, to eradicate social evils, etc. So there are many things which are being propagated using this mass media as a channel of communication. And media is something indirectly or directly, it persuades the audiences to accept or to buy accept a change, or may change the perceptions regarding the social behavior, or it changes the attitudes of people, etc., regarding certain issues. And apart from that, the goods and services which are offered by the different companies also been communicated by the mass media, and it persuades the audiences to buy the products and services which are offered by various companies also. Then we have so these are some of the functions of mass media, what you have in your syllabus. Apart from that, the mass media also provides a lot of entertainment for the readers, the viewers, and also the listeners of a radio station. Apart from that, the mass media also acts as a watchdog of the society. It promotes the openness among the members of the social system by projecting what is happening in the society. And it also forms the public opinion regarding the politics, or political leaders, or political parties, or their functioning, etc. It also makes the individuals aware of their duties, etc. And it also provides lot of information for the benefit of the viewers, listeners, and the readers. It also promotes development of the country, or it also promotes the heritage of a nation, diverse cultures of the nation, etc. And it also the media is also considered as the fourth estate. uh, it acts as a watchdog of the society, along with the judiciary administration. Media is also considered as the one of the pillars of the democracy. Okay, I think we have only, how much time we have? Only 3 minutes we have. Just you have, if you have any doubts, just you can just ask me. I can clarify your doubts. Yes. If you don't have any doubts, it's fine. Somebody is asking me that, ma'am, how can I get this recorded class? Okay, yes, this is transmitting in live. Mohammed, you have any question? Raising hand. Okay, you people can ask to unmute. Yes, you can share. Okay, this is the class is live streaming, and maybe this is under BRAOU live 9 channel. You can access to the content maybe from tomorrow onwards, I believe, where you can go back and watch the class. If you have any queries also, you can just share, we will answer. Mohammed, you have any doubt? You are raising hand, but you are not speaking. You can unmute yourself or you can text me. Okay, you have first time joined the class. So, okay, we have completed today. We have completed the 3rd class. The other 2 lectures are there in YouTube. BRAOU live 9 channel, I believe. You can just go back and access to the video lessons. You can just, if you have any queries also, you can just share. Tomorrow also we have a class. If you people have any doubts, just share your doubts. Tomorrow we'll discuss those things also. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes. I will leave the session. It is already 10:59. I don't know. You have a continuation class now? I'm not aware of that. They gave us time 10 to 11, so we have to wind up at 11. So all those things are clear now, what we have discussed, the models of communication, what we have discussed, I think it is clear. In the next classes, we'll discuss the role of the media. We have also the concept called journalism and the other aspects. We'll ask how many classes are going to be allotted for us. Based on that, we have to confine ourselves to the time and we have to plan the classes.
Okay,
So
ma'am.
I'm leaving the session.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, right, bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, all of you. Thank you.